Okay, we'll get started. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. We appreciate you being here with us. Today we have our very own Shahram Bagari, who is going to be talking to us about how to improve your vulnerability management program. So vulnerability management is really integral to an overarching security program. I actually like to call it the cornerstone of security because it really comes down to where you're vulnerable and where you're at most risk. And so you really can't protect something if you don't know what you have. So having a good vulnerability management program will help you understand what you have on your network, applications that you have, and then be able to understand what vulnerabilities or what threats you have within your infrastructure. So today, Shahram's going to talk about how to improve your vulnerability management program. He's going to talk to you about how you can increase its effectiveness and also discuss how to use a risk-based approach to vulnerability management. And then David Gousset is also going to show us how to use SAINT based on some of the things that Shahram is telling us today with our SAINT software and vulnerability scanning technology. But first, let me introduce Shahram Bagari. Shahram's he leads the security engineering team and serves as a information security officer for a public sector organization. He holds a master's degree in cybersecurity, holds a CISSP certification, and also is a certified ethical hacker. So Shahram, I won't take any more time. I'll turn it right over to you. So let's get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Diane. And thank you everyone for joining. Again, my name is Shahram, so I'll be going over the slides with you today. Just at a quick recap, there's not that many slides, and I did that intentionally so we can have, an organic conversation and answer any questions you guys may have. Quinn, I think you're sharing your screen, which I'm okay with. If you don't mind going to, okay, I can share mine. All right, let me just bring up the presentation. All right, can everyone see my screen? Quinn, Diane, can you guys
I can see your screen.
See my screen? Okay, cool. All right, so no worries. Okay, so the agenda for today is very quick. We're going to go over the importance of a vulnerability management program, how to increase its effectiveness, and how to integrate a risk management approach within your vulnerability management program. And while we go through the slides, if at any point you have any questions, feel free to chime right in. So first off, what is a vulnerability management program? There's a lot of definitions out there, but the one I enjoyed sharing with you guys today was from SANS. And they say it's the process in which vulnerabilities in IT are identified and the risk of these vulnerabilities are evaluated. The reason I decided to choose SANS is because of that second portion, the risk of these vulnerabilities are evaluated. And we'll speak to that more in the upcoming slides. So why implement a vulnerability management program? Well, first, it's industry best practices. If you're looking to have a security program within your organization, whether that's small, medium, or large size, I highly recommend, and I think if you speak with any security professional, that a security program is vital. And if vulnerability management is a foundational cornerstone, like Diane said, to your security management program. And aside from just best practices, compliance. We serve in industries or have clients where we're bound by regulations, whether that's NIST 800, RMF, PCI, HIPAA, or the cybersecurity maturity model, all of which have their own flavor of saying, do vulnerability scanning. As an example, NIST 800-53, Control RA5, vulnerability scanning control says the organization must conduct vulnerability scanning on their host within the organization defined frequency. And we'll elaborate more on that frequency and what best suits each organizational needs. Next is, you can also evaluate your patch management effectiveness in your organization. say there's thousands of vulnerabilities that are released every month according to the CVEs, and you want to justify how effective those patches are. You tell your patch administrators to go ahead and start taking care of all those known vulnerabilities, and they say it's great, or they take it a step further and they come back and show you numbers based on the endpoint management solution. They show you successful and unsuccessful numbers. That's great, but at the end of the day, you want to know if those CVEs are truly being triggered on the host or not. And you'll then have two authoritative sources where you can compare and determine what's really going on. Is there an issue on your endpoint patching solution, or is that vulnerability a false positive? All of which are effective to your vulnerability management program. Next is you can also identify live endpoints on your network. It's not just about identifying vulnerabilities, but also you want to know what's responding to pings. That could be printers, workstations, network appliances, or IoT devices. And you can see with vulnerability scanning, you can also build on that asset management piece to your overall security management program. So not only do you have your known vulnerabilities for operating systems or softwares or applications, but you're starting to have a better understanding of your assets on your environment, and can also create triggered alerts or reports for any anomalies or new IP addresses or host names that are triggered in new reoccurring security scans. And to take that a step further, you can begin fingerprinting and enumerating your infrastructure or your environment. Like I said, having vulnerabilities is great, but you want to take it a step further than just the known vulnerabilities within that procedure. You want to game plan for upcoming end-of-life software, upcoming end-of-life operating systems, or any kind of deprecated protocols that why implement a vulnerability scanning tool where it only detects against known vulnerabilities and not zero-day? Well, I would say if you're not doing your due diligence and patching your known vulnerabilities, then why are we even speaking about 0 days? But to be more polite, I would say, well, that's why there's benchmarks out there. That's why we harden our systems, so we can be better protected against 0-day exploits or vulnerabilities, things that we just don't know of. There's STIGs, there's CIS, and there's additional information out there to build on. And you can add those compliance or those benchmarks within your scanning tool to identify deviations and formulate a plan moving forward. I also really like unauthenticated scans. So as you all know, authenticated scans are either you use a privileged account, you scan your host, and you get back vulnerabilities, or your host have an agent that reports back the same results. But what about from an attacker's point of view? And that's where unauthenticated scans are just as important. You really want to be able to see if by any chance an attacker is on your network but hasn't compromised the user in your network, what information are they able to see? What are they able to enumerate? What protocols are they able to see traversing through your environment? All of which are very valuable information for you to have this kind of black or gray box testing feel to your overall testing or vulnerability management approach. Now, this is great. You've invested in this vulnerability management tool. You have a security engineer or you have a security analyst, but you're not getting the returns you're noticing. And to be able to have a successful vulnerability management program, in my opinion, are a few things. One is don't just export the critical high, medium severities and send it off to your administrators and hope someone does something with it. You really need to group and formulate those findings in your assets. In my opinion, if you have your group segmented off by, say, server administrators, Windows administrators, Linux administrators, or endpoint administrators, what have you, whatever that looks like, group those vulnerabilities based off those associate team members. So they can only focus on what they truly have to work on and don't have this extra noise in figuring out who to send these reports to. That just wastes hours and it has, it doesn't work out for anyone. And taking that a step further, I always advocate to have administrators and the operations team have access to the vulnerability scanning tool. Now, they won't have access to launch scans or configure scans or see other vulnerability data from other tools, which helps with separation of duties, but it allows them to have a single pane view in terms of dashboards of new vulnerabilities, past due vulnerabilities, end of life operating systems, or their most vulnerable hosts, and pairing that up with automated or reoccurring reports, they can really take action and provide value when it comes to mitigating or remediating those vulnerabilities. And the next most important thing is also establishing a remediation timeframe for these different severities. As management, we have the responsibility to say, okay, what severity requires what sort of timeline to be remediated? And so we may say critical severities need to be patched in 30 days, highs in 60 days, and medium in 6 months, for example. But that policy needs to be established and it needs to be enforced. Because without some type of guideline or roadmap, administrators will just patch whatever they want to. In my opinion, the most important thing is the next item, which is setting up that relationship with administrators and with your operations team as security professionals. Because as security professionals, whenever we open our mouth or send an email, there's usually more work to be done for someone else. And that's just annoying. We're also the bearer of bad news. Everything about us security people, no one wants to have anything to do with us. And I really don't blame them. So that's why it's important to understand and have that relationship with those administrators and let them know that we're in this together and we're here to help you. It's not that we're just trying to point fingers and say, you didn't patch this, or hey, your patch that you applied failed. It's, hey, let's set together, build a strategy, which goes into the next item, setting a remediation strategy for your vulnerabilities. And so I always have reoccurring meetings with my administrators where we talk about challenges, issues, potential false positives, really anything they want to talk about. There's plenty of times where I'm in those meetings and I don't say a word, but at least they know that I'm there in case they need anything. And I'm not just a person who's sending them reports and dashboards and good luck, patch that. You know, that relationship in my mind is probably the key component in driving down numbers. Before I go in the next slide, Diane, did you say Quinn wanted to do a quick demo, or should I just keep moving forward?
No, I think I'll have David wanted to, before you get into the risk management part of it, have David go ahead and kind of walk through some things that you've just talked about using SAINT.
Okay. Before we do that, does anyone have any questions? All right, I'll stop sharing and you can take it away.
Okay, I believe you can all see my screen now. So when you open up SAINT, this is your default page. Thank you very much for joining us today. And what I'm going to do is put into practice what you've just heard, where we're going to take a data set, and I'll choose this one down here. And what we want to do is we want to use a couple of features here to make this, to sort out the 4,000 vulnerabilities that we find. And we do that by using a custom severity set and also combining that with our asset filters. So when we go over to our asset management, I can go into my asset filters and pick out the filter criteria that I want to see. Right now I'm going to use criticality, and which is on a high, and then also the LS class of Windows. And then I'm applying that to the data set that I've chosen. And for this, we have, you can look over on the left and you'll see that source is the internal external scans. and I'm going to choose that asset filter of, let's see, I had that on high. Let me just go over there to the all vulnerabilities. And now we have the high criticalities and also windows. And then I have my custom severity set down here that I chose that I had created before. And for our custom severity sets, it's right over here. And when we look at that, we have the NIST 853 for high, medium, and low. And I'm just using the high right now. And so I can sort this on the our custom severities on high, or I can go medium and bring those up. And then we tie that into our dashboards. So when I go over to my dashboard here, I can see that I have the, again, my custom severity counts. And usually we have our regular severity counts up here. And then I can choose the ones, my custom severity count, so it applies to my to the servers that I'm looking for. And I can very easily go out here to my to click this, click on high, and then get a CSV out of this, so I can pass that on to my team. And good thing about this is we can save our save this view, and also we can save the dashboard options that I've chosen before. So next time we were talking about the remediation timeline. So that brings in another feature that we have, which is our ticketing rules. So when you run a scan, we generate tickets that can be internal to our to our software here, and we can create rule sets. So here's my high rule set that for these particular hosts, and I'm going to match the windows, and I want a high severity level, and I can assign that to a particular person, and then also give the days until due. So I have, for now, this is for 30 days, and then also we can also tie that in for 20 days for Derek. So that kind of ties in all the particular functions that we've gone over. Okay, and then I'll pass that back. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. So this is the last slide that I'll be sharing with you guys today, and that's really how to integrate a risk management approach into your vulnerability management program. And that's essential. A risk management strategy, in my opinion, is essential to any program. And the reason for that is, say you have two identical servers, both affected by the same vulnerability. One's public facing and one's an internal server. Which one do you prioritize to patch first? And I'm sure everyone here would say, the public facing or DMZ server. So that same thought process that you went to, which was, this is a public facing server, it's exposed to the internet, and malicious users can get to it much easier than my internal server that's behind the firewall and has several other security controls. That prioritization, that technique that you use needs to be applied to your overall vulnerability management program. And so what we need to do is we need to identify our high-risk assets, those being public-facing servers, any servers that are transmitting, storing, or hosting PII, PHI, sensitive data, proprietary data, really anything that you consider as an organization to be valuable to you need to be categorized as high-risk assets. And then in my opinion, those high-risk assets need to have their own separate remediation timeline in terms of patching and mitigation. Because say in our original example, we said critical is 30 days and high is 60 days. With high risk assets, I would do criticals 2 weeks and highs 1 month. more stringent, more secure, because we have to, because if in case of any breach, that those pose catastrophic or negative impact to our organization. And then applying a vendor supplied patch is all great, but we live in a world where that's not always the case. We have our own organizational mission. We need to provide products, solutions, services to our customers. There could be a time where a patch will directly conflict that mission. If we patch Java, that's an embedded component into the software, and it ends up breaking the software that is our source of revenue, then we're not going to patch it. And I'm sure everyone here will understand and agree to that. But how do we properly accept that risk? Because that's what we're doing. We're saying we're accepting this risk and we're not patching it. And that's to document that acceptance, and to document and to also come back at another timeline, in my opinion, no later than a year, to review that acceptance. Because say 6 or 7 months from now, that same software has been upgraded and it can now support a newer version of Java. So the importance of documenting and having justification details to those acceptance of risk is very important, and to also have it reviewed. We can also mitigate risk. You can effectively mitigate a risk by turning off the server, right? So mitigating risk is not actually patching it, it's lowering your overall risk exposure. In a more practical solution, you can add rules to your firewall, or make sure the server has antivirus running, has EDR running, make sure your SIM is integrated. There's layers and layers and layers of security that can be used as compensating controls, which is our next point, that you really need to have a great understanding of what security tools are in my arsenal and how can I use those to lower risk and to also accept ones that make sense. And finally, the last thing I have to share with you is we need to continuously review this process and continuously grow the process, because the infrastructure is changing daily, interconnections are only expanding, technologies are evolving, and everything is just getting more complicated, in my opinion. And that's why for any security program, you have to stay on top of it and make sure you're updating it at a good organizational defined frequency. And that's all I have for you all today, and I'll open the floor to questions.
I have a question.
So I have one. Oh, go ahead.
My question is, can you speak to the CIS controls and how they would be used?
In terms of baseline, is that what I'm trying to?
Yes.
Yeah. So CIS benchmarking and compliance is very important, and it's the cornerstone of making something a hardening system. So depending on the source of vulnerability scanning tool, you can integrate that CIS benchmark within the tool to scan your host and then identify deviations from that actual benchmark. So you'll have to first have a good understanding of what OSs you have in your environment. So say you want to use a CIS level 1 benchmark on your Windows 2016 servers. So you pull that file, you implement it in your scanning tool, and then you start scanning with that audit file. And what should happen is any deviations from those check marks is then presented to you in a way that you can then go to your administrators and say, hey, why are we deviating from these CIS benchmarks? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. What else? Don't be shy.
Just one question here.
Great question. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Just a question I have is, we've seen a lot of talk around automation and automating remediation, but I got the sense, I also get the sense that it's quite difficult to achieve, I suppose, depending on the environment. So maybe I'd just like to find out from Saint what sort of capability there is in terms of actual remediation of vulnerabilities that are found, or integration with tools that actually do that, like Puppet, for instance.
But this is David. Let me take that question. Right now, we really don't have an integration that goes into to any automated patching or remediation time. So, you know, at this time, there are ways to export our reports, and then you can and then you
sense to patch that vulnerability per se than going just top-down approach and trying to tackle it in that sense. So I would personally use a combination of a ticketing system that Saint offers, and also putting together a good strategy and truly understanding the data that's available to you.
Yeah, great. I think that makes sense. Thanks.
Sure, no problem.
I have a question if I can.
Yep.
Can you or David show the different policies that are built in to meet, say, PCI or HIPAA compliance?
I wanted to see how they right? That's kind of what I thought they were doing.
Yeah, I can let David show that piece.
I need to look at them. I'm gonna right. So let's.
I hear some background.
I give them the setbacks back for the goal. So look at me. I'll look at this. This is what the kind of stuff.
David, I think your audio is having issues. I don't know if anyone else can hear him well.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I'm sorry. So when you go down to our scan policies, you can select the policies within SAINT, whether it's our full vulnerability scan, or say our PCI internal or external policies there.
I see.
Another way that we're scanning is using our benchmarks, going back to the CIS benchmarks. And say taking a look at your 2016 server here, when I go through to edit this policy, sorry, when I go to run this, I can choose the policy that I want to look at and go through and edit that while I'm getting my environment to be completely compliant. I can turn off these rules as necessary, but also go in and meet that and meet what your policy is now. So if I want to choose that to say 4 logins and apply, then I now have a new policy that I can use. And when we go into and then I can save this. I can save that profile and apply that during my next scan. And also, with our benchmark scanning, not only can we bring in the ones that you see here, but if you have a CIS subscription, you can bring in other policies with an upload. You can upload your own benchmarks. Okay. And then there's a question in here. Is there a CMMC scan policy yet? No, but that is on our radar. We are actively looking into that policy and how vulnerability scanning meets part of that. All right. Anything else that any other questions that people have? Okay. Well, I'll turn that back over.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time. And I hope if you have any questions or want to talk with us further regarding your vulnerability management program and/or how you can use SAINT to improve your overall program as well as its effectiveness, please do reach out. Thank you so much for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This concludes our